if you're married to a narcissist and you're about to go through a divorce or you're going through one, you have to understand that this is a fight to the death over the kids in some respects. That the narcissist is weaponizing the kids to hurt you.
A caring heart, a guiding light, leading us through the darkest night. Escape the grip of a narcissist on our journey to recovery bliss. This is the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel.
Padideh, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really good. You're in San Diego this time around recording. It's a little different from last go round.
Yeah, actually, from where I live in Orange County, San Diego's really the next street over from where I live.
Oh,
Believe it or
really?
not. Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because I live in South Orange County, and so it's a 25-minute ride, and I love driving here. So I'm at the Olis Media today, and
Fantastic.
really looking forward to our conversation today.
Wonderful. And, our conversation, the last couple of podcasts we've done, we've not had guests. What we've decided we were going to go do is kind of leverage some of our own strengths and have conversations that perhaps other people don't have sometimes. And what we want to do here is to go talk about how to win a custody battle. You're a divorce attorney, and these are the kinds of things that that you are working on all the time. And I want to make sure that we leverage your strengths to go help our audience of people, because there are a lot of them out there who have narcissists and are married to narcissists in some capacity, some way, shape, or form, and they're having to go deal with this, particularly with their children. So first question is it winnable? Can it be won? Because we know that narcissists tend to exaggerate, lie, gaslight, and I'm sure they don't change when they're in front of a judge either. So what's the process of protecting your kids and getting your kids back and those kinds of things and winning a custody battle?
Well, I want to just say that, I've been a divorce attorney and custody attorney for over 22 years. And in the last 5 to 6 years, I've learned about narcissists and cluster B personality disorders. And one thing that all of this education and has taught me is that there's no winning with a narcissist. You don't win while you're dating them. You don't win while you're married to them. And you're sure as shit not going to win when you're divorcing them, because they are going to, I always say this to my client. It's like you're on the Titanic with your narcissist, right? You're going through a divorce. Imagine you're on the Titanic, and instead of throwing you a life vest, they're actually trying to drown you before they drown themselves. So
Yes.
imagine that visually. I'm very visual, so I always like to tell my clients, like these visual things. Imagine that's what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no actual winning. You're in a
Yeah.
divorce. You are going to be separating assets, debts you might not have even known about, especially when it comes to a narcissist, because they always have this other life that you don't even know about. And then you're trying to sort of do what's amicable and fair and in the best interest of your child, and they are trying to drown you. So there's no winning.
And you make a really good point there. And we should probably say this up front. When you're divorcing a narcissist, this is not like a regular divorce in a lot of ways. There are people out there who have fell in love and fell out of love and have respect for their spouse, and they respect them not only as a spouse but as a parent, and they decide that they want to divorce as peacefully as possible, and champion the idea that both parents still need to see the kid and to be involved in their lives, even though mom and dad are not in love anymore. They find a way to go do this peacefully. This is not the case with a narcissist. It just doesn't happen.
Correct. So those people, yes, so they might be in the litigation phase for a couple of months in the beginning, but they soon realize that litigation is not the way to go and they want to mediate. And so we help them negotiate and mediate a custody settlement that makes sense for both of the parties and for their children. So that is very different. Or they come to mediation or collaborative law, which is also something that we practice. And we can talk about those at another time. But for a true narcissist, they want to make sure that they go the litigation route. Now, they might trick you. They might say, well, let's do mediation first. It's a waste of time, okay? But
Is it just because you can't resolve anything with a narcissist? There's no sense in mediating. You just need somebody to
well,
kind of.
with a narcissist, they're always thinking 10 to 20 steps ahead of you because they're playing chess while you're playing checkers. And remember one thing, some of our clients that come into the office, they've never heard about narcissism. So they're just thinking, okay, my spouse was toxic, my spouse was cheating on me, my spouse was, sort of, they now they know sort of gaslighting. They'll say like, my spouse was gaslighting, but, so they don't really know, right? So they come into a divorce attorney's office and for the first time, and you're like, well, your spouse sounds sort of narcissistic or other cluster B personality disorders. And they're like, what? What does that even mean? So then you have to sort of educate the client of what that means and tell them to go read some books, look at YouTube, look at, channels like yourself, male victims of female narcissists. I'm always sending my male clients to you. Just to kind of educate them about what narcissism is. And obviously, we cannot diagnose someone as a narcissist. We're lawyers, we're not therapists. But people have narcissistic tendencies, right, which can be equally as bad. So that's how I educate my clients. But nowadays, clients call and they say, I'm divorcing a narcissist because they've already looked up the law firm. We have a lot of education about narcissism on our website. And then also they've heard this podcast. So they're like, my spouse is a narcissist. So what we do is a strategy session and we make sure that we sort of follow this guideline. It could definitely change, but it's a strategy session of how do we get from the first document, which is the petition for divorce in California, and the settlement and trial. And so there's a lot, obviously, that goes in between that. But the first thing I tell clients is you need to start documenting if you haven't been. Like journaling is very important because you want to know dates and times because a narcissist, what they'll do is they'll start to lie and manipulate, and you're thinking, wait a minute, did I say that? Did they pick up the child here, there? And you won't remember. So I start to say journal, and if they're not good at journaling, which I know you're great at journaling because you did that during your divorce, but I say just do a timeline and just put it in your notes, like when things are happening so that you can refer back to it.
What kind of things are you interested? Like what kind of things matter in a journal or in a timeline? If you're keeping a list of things, what kind of things do you want in there? You want conversations with the kids? Do you want help me understand what should be in a journal? What kind of documentation should be in a journal of sorts?
So if they're coming for a divorce from the date that they're sitting with a divorce attorney, I want to know going forward, when is the co-parent? I mean, you don't co-parent with a narcissist. It's actually counter-parenting. They're calling it anti-parenting, but counter-parenting. But I want to know sort of when are they picking up the child? When are they spending time with the child? How many hours? I want you to go back and if my client doesn't know this, they should know this. Like, who's the principal at the school? Who are their teachers? Get me their grades. I want to know all of that because what the narcissist will do is say that my client now is not a good parent. And so I want to start to strategize that. If you don't know, then you need to know. Like, ask your child, what's your favorite color? Spend more, because, listen, sometimes you're not thinking about this, right? You're just parenting your child, but see if there's any allergies. Like, when was the last time you went to the pediatrician? Like, start to do those things and document it, because
Yeah.
that becomes really important. Because the first thing that happens is we'll file for the petition, they'll file for the response, and then what's called a request for order. And you're saying, like, I was a primary parent, right? And they're saying, no, you weren't. You were an absentee parent. And so that's why we want to make sure that we have this sort of documented, like, no, I was the parent that was always dropping off and picking up. I actually had court yesterday. I was in a trial for 7 hours, John. That's why I'm so tired today. And it was in that case, Dad was saying he was the stay-at-home parent, but the two oldest daughters, 12 and 8, don't want anything to do with him because he's lying. And so I had to show, the judge that, like, no, my client, it was the primary parent, and this is why. And sometimes when you do daycare, you have to sign your child out. So we were able to get that and say, Dad never picked up the two daughters from daycare, and here's the evidence of it. Because remember that judges like to see evidence and documents. They don't like it when you go to court and start name calling. And because they've heard this word narcissism now, because that's a trendy word, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be, but it's a trendy word, they don't want to hear it. They're like, unless the person is diagnosed as a narcissist, and I want an expert to say that in court, you can't diagnose your spouse. So give me the documents to show that you were the primary parent.
So ultimately, you're trying to build a case for custody, and I'm assuming primary custody, and then there's shared custody as well, and there's got to be tension in this, right? So if I'm in a position, and unfortunately I was not, I didn't have to deal with child custody. I waited till my kids got out of high school, so intentionally, so I didn't have to deal with that and child support and all that other nonsense, and that would have changed things for me. But when people are doing this and are married, find themselves married to a narcissist, whether they know it or not, they know the narcissist isn't good for the kids. What are you fighting for? Are you fighting for shared custody? Are you fighting for sole custody? How do you feel about, do you want to take them away from that parent, even though they're their biological father or mother? How do you figure that out?
So each case is different, obviously. So every case, I've been practicing for 22 years, like I said, and each case is different. But with the narcissistic cases, there's very much similarities, and there's a blueprint, I like to say, because the narcissistic parent is always going to say that I call them the innocent spouse, even though I don't mean innocent like they did everything right in the marriage, but the person that doesn't have the personality disorder, they're always going to say, the narcissist is always going to say that parent is not a good parent and they haven't been parenting and they want sole custody. And so because they are very much extremist, you have to build your case to say, no, that's not true. And either you're fighting for primary custody, or what California more and more likes to see is the 50-50 equal timeshare, they call it, the 2-2-3, Monday through Wednesday, drop off at school. The other parent takes the child Wednesday after school till Friday, and then parent A that had it Monday picks up the child Friday after school to Monday morning. So that's sort of what they like to see, is the 2-2-3, there's the 2-5, and then there's every other week. So that's really the parenting that could potentially happen if you have 50-50. If you have...
Go ahead.
If you have primary custody, then obviously it could be one parent sees the child Wednesday for dinner, after school until dinner, and then every other weekend. But
Mhm.
courts in California, especially in Southern California where we practice, they are working towards 50-50. They just are. They want both parents now, because it used to be, when we started practicing law 22 years ago, mostly the husbands were working, and so they couldn't have that sort of 50-50 because it would conflict with their work schedule. Now, because women and mothers are working more and more, courts like to see that 50-50, or even like if it's
Mhm.
40-60 sort of, custody arrangement.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I mean, if you're married to a narcissist and you're about to go through a divorce, or you're going through one, you have to understand that this is a fight to the death over the kids in some respects.
Yes,
That that
100%.
that the narcissist is weaponizing the kids to hurt you. And in many situations, they are going to lie, they'll cheat, they'll falsify documentation. That it will be hard, full court press to keep you, the victim, from perhaps even seeing your kids. And I I,
Yes.
I know men that I've spent time in conversation with over the years, um, who have wives who have made up stories about them so that they're reported to child services to try and keep them from their kids, and do a pretty damn effective job at that. So these stories are ridiculous. I mean, some of these guys are millions of dollars in debt defending themselves against the
Yes.
lies of the narcissist. So this is not for the faint of heart. You say they're they're counter parents, they're anti parents, and anti-human even in some respects. They will lie about absolutely anything to win custody of their children,
Yes.
and to try and keep you as the good parent even out of the picture.
Yes. So journaling is the first strategy. The second is keeping communication on a parenting app. There's two that we use in Southern California, and judges love these apps. They're called Talking Parents, which I just did an interview with Talking Parents. So go read that interview on their website. So Talking Parents is one of them, and it's free for the parents. The other one is Our Family Wizard. The thing I like about Our Family Wizard is that the attorney can have access to the conversation, and so can the judge. So we can log on sometimes on behalf of our client and see what the other spouse or the narcissistic spouse has
Hmm.
written, and sort of help and guide our clients into how to respond. Because remember that when the victim, I don't like to call them victim, I like to call them surviving spouse. When the survivor walks in, they're sort of like, how do I respond? They're triggered by everything that the narcissist is doing. And sometimes with Our Family Wizard, we can log on and see, and I'll tell my client, like, you have to respond in 1 or 2 sentences maximum. You cannot
Hmm.
talk about anything that deals with emotions. You can't talk about anything that deals with the actual divorce process. You have to just keep it to talk about your child. So that's the second strategy, is to get the parents quickly on this app, which makes the narcissist sort of have to play nice in the sandbox, knowing that at any point, instead of a text message, which, people now and narcissists know this, you can delete text messages. You can't do that on these two apps. I think there's another one called Onward. So those are the three apps. So definitely get on a parenting app
Hmm.
quickly, with the advice of counsel, obviously, and that way everything is documented. And you can also put
Hmm.
expenses on there, John. So like,
Hmm.
if they owe you something from a copay, you can put that on there. And the good thing about the app is you can see when they open it, like there's a read receipt. So you can see when they open it, you can see when they responded, and judges like to say you have to respond within 24 hours.
Hmm. And those apps, if I'm not mistaken, are also used later on after the divorce to continue to make sure parents are playing nice, with respect to their kids. I know I was in a situation with one of the guys I know and have kind of coached over the last couple of years. Is uh, his ex didn't want to bring the kid, let the kid come over for their custody. So he's having to go escalate this, and I think an app like that might really help in some situations. So you can see, and a judge can see exactly what's going on and who's not playing nice and who is. I imagine it's very hard sometimes for a narcissist to play nice when they're not nice. They're just
Right.
not. Yeah.
And it's funny because, not funny, but ironic, but you can see from when the client first comes in how the narcissist is responding, and then you say, okay, we need to make this a court order that they respond on the app. And then you could see, I mean, I've seen this so many times where the narcissist like totally switches, right? And they're like, dear so-and-so, like, and they start to play nice for a while, and you're just like, okay, I can see that, they're trying to put a good front for the judge,
Hmm.
but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, this keeps them as accountable as you can keep a narcissist. You can't really
Yeah.
keep them accountable. But so that's the second strategy. The third strategy is do not retaliate. I have seen this, John, blow up in people's faces. You cannot retaliate against a narcissist. You, as the sympathetic, empathetic, surviving spouse, you do not have the tools to fight this battle with the narcissist. If you did, you'd still be married to them. So
Yes.
what you need to do is completely remove yourself from the situation. I'm a big advocate of therapy, as you know. Other divorce attorneys that are my friends and colleagues, they don't like that I say, if you're going through a divorce, seek therapy. It doesn't have to be therapy for the rest of your life. It could be 3 sessions or 7 sessions. But if you're dealing with a narcissist in court, you want to make sure you know what they're doing, and you want to make sure that you stay as grounded and stoic as humanly possible, because they will
Hmm.
trigger you. Their job is to make your life a living hell, and they are very good at accomplishing
Hmm.
that.
And I would guess that throughout the process, it is constantly from the narcissist, expect the unexpected. You don't think they're going to go do something, they're absolutely going to go do it, and they will turn every screw they can possibly turn to try and sway it their way, and unpredictably so. You might think you've got resolution, and then the next day it's gone. I
Yes.
know. I know. I have a friend who was in divorce court for 5 years. He was trying to get this divorce done, and I don't know whether his wife had some narcissistic tendencies. She was ultimately just a very difficult person, and it was 5 years of this before they'd actually come to resolution. So it's a constant battle with the most at the highest level and in the most difficult circumstances.
Right.
And
So,
therapy and things like that also, it's also a time where financially you don't know what's going to happen on the other end. You enter into this, you know deconstruction period where money doesn't go where it once went, and jobs may be different and they may not be, and then you've got child support and all of that, and you don't know what the other side of the equation financially is going to look like. I mean, there are people that drop hundreds of thousands of dollars on a divorce, I'm
yes.
sure, and child custody on top of that. So so it becomes a time where money is also uncertain, adding to the stress. And by and large, I think you'd agree with this statement: the more difficult, the more people fight, the more expensive it is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I want to say 2 things. The first thing is the longest divorce I've ever been involved in was 12 years
Oh my gosh.
in LA County,
You're
downtown.
kidding.
No, Stanley Moss
12
Courthouse.
years?
12 years. The child at that point was over 18, okay? But they were fighting for royalties and things of that nature. But yes, 12 years is the longest. And then one thing I want to say, which this can sound so self-serving, but it's important, I think, for me to say this as a practitioner. What happens is, a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times, we're representing the innocent spouse, right? We discussed that in the beginning, what that means, right? The narcissistic spouse, what happens is that they will get tired of playing nice in the sandbox. And what happens is they will turn on the attorneys, because I had this just happened the end of last year, and they will say, you're not advocating enough. You're not doing this. They're fighting, they're fighting dirty. They're lying. They're, forging documents. They're doing all these things. And you're not doing that. And so what happens, John, is they'll turn on, and I've had this happen so many times, and I'll go back to the client and say, we are an ethical firm. We have morals. We are not going to play by these rules. We're not going to start manufacturing things that don't exist. We are not going to lie on your behalf. And so sometimes what happens is you'll see, even though the client wasn't the narcissist, they start to get those narcissistic tendencies, like it almost transfers over from one table to the next. And you can see, because they're like, fighting fair in family court is sort of not the best solution sometimes when you're dealing with a narcissist. So I'll say, and what I said to that client was, I don't think that our law firm is the right law firm for you. Because if you want to start playing dirty, like the narcissist ex is playing dirty and the narcissist ex attorney, then maybe you need to go and get an attorney that's going to lie and manufacture evidence and, forge documents, but that's not going to be our law firm. And I don't think this is discussed enough.
Actually, this is a good question. I just thought of this. So do narcissists often go through more than one attorney?
Yes.
Because perhaps the attorney is not being aggressive enough or manufacturing things like you say. So they go through more than one attorney.
Yes.
The second question would be, does the victim often wind up going through more than one attorney?
Yes. So what happens is, the narcissist definitely goes through, I would say, between 3 to 7 attorneys from the beginning of the divorce to the end. So I would say about 3 to 7. That's what I've seen, the average. And then the innocent spouse, they will usually go anywhere from 1 to 3 attorneys. So if they get this, if they understand what I'm telling you from the beginning of when we first started this conversation, if they start to do the documentation, doing the app, and the third thing I said was not engaging, not going tit for tat, because you cannot win against a narcissist if you're going tit for tat, because don't forget, they're lying, manipulating, manufacturing evidence. They're forging documents. I've seen this multiple times in court. What will happen is you will start to get very angry, and you will turn on your attorney because you're saying, why aren't you doing the same things they're doing? So I've seen it where a client will start with us and end with us, and I've seen it where they get really mad, and either they'll self-represent because they're out of money, or they will get an attorney that is really, there's a fine line, right? And they will just go beyond that fine line. And believe it or not, in LA County, the ethical attorneys know those attorneys. We know about them. And so I had a situation where I was recommending, because our law firm was too busy, and so we have colleagues that we recommend. And my colleague, she said, well, who is the opposing, counsel? And I said the name, and she said, oh no, I'm never taking a case against that law firm because they lie, they manufacture evidence, and they're actually the narcissist too. And so those law firms we know them. We know that they lie for their clients and they don't care. And as long as their client is paying them, the narcissist is paying the narcissistic attorney, they'll take the case. But a lot of times, those also blow up right? Because once the money is gone, like let's say there's a house and there's equity in the house and the house is sold, so there's some liquid cash there to pay your attorney. Once you can't pay your attorney, the case is either going to settle quickly or that narcissistic client will go to another attorney. So as soon as they don't like what they hear, the
They
narcissist,
gone.
they're gone. And I've tell my clients this, like, okay, we won this battle in court, but I'm going to give it 30 days before I get a substitution of attorney where the narcissist is going to get another attorney. And my clients are like, "Are you a fortune teller?" I'm like, "No, I just know how the narcissist thinks, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
I've been battling them for so many years."
Yeah. So that again, have you found also that that narcissists are seeking out narcissistic attorneys, like birds of a feather flock together?
Oh,
And not only are you having to deal with the narcissist, but you're now having to compound that with another narcissistic attorney who's literally forging or faking information um, for the case just to win and continue the weaponizing against the victim.
absolutely. And we do at our law firm, we do a lot of vetting in the beginning before we accept a client because we don't want to be representing narcissists. Because if we do represent the narcissist, guess what happens? They're not going to last as a client at the firm very long, right? Because we talked about the ethics and the morals of the law firm. And so, you know, absolutely. So what happens is the narcissist usually will find a narcissistic attorney that'll won't fact check anything they say. They'll just put forth whatever narrative the narcissist is claiming, which is untrue. And so they'll just keep coming to court and telling the judge the same thing. They won't have documents, right? They won't have those. In the beginning, I talked about those documents and sort of
Yeah.
journaling. They won't have that, but they'll just, say this narrative over and over. And that's what the narcissist does. Like they say this narrative over and over. And eventually you're like, I think I believe this now. And so they're trying to sort of trick the judge into believing this narrative. And so the other side, which is what we represent, we have to come with actual documentation and the law. The law matters to judges, believe it or not. I mean, I think some people would argue with me on that. But, this is the law. This is what the law says. We have documentation saying that our client has been the primary parent. And
Hmm.
so we would like to continue the status quo going forward. The other thing we can do, the fourth strategy, is get an evaluation. There's two types in Southern California. And you can ask for minors counsel, which is an
Hmm.
attorney for the child or the children. That also can sort of help because that's a third party neutral that is coming to court and testifying before the judge on behalf of the child. So that's like a
Hmm.
fourth strategy. But again, that costs money. So, if for some reason you don't have that kind of money to shell out, then, you're not going to get that third party neutral for your child. But
Yeah.
it is very, very difficult. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. We decided that we were not going to sugarcoat anything and be very raw on this podcast from the very beginning. It is very difficult to divorce a narcissist. I would say it's hard to get a divorce, but it is 1,000,000% more difficult with a narcissist. Not 100 or 1,000, 100,000. It's 1,000,000% more difficult to divorce a narcissist because they're constantly going to be lying, manipulating, gaslighting, projecting, and now they're doing this to the judge. And let's say that the judge rules for you. It doesn't mean that the narcissist is going to say, "Oh, okay, I have to now abide by the court order." They won't do that. They don't like authority, as you know. Narcissists hate authority. So You'll have to then file a contempt action, which is very expensive. So it's not like once you get a court order, you're in the clear. Now you have to file contempt actions and you have to go back to court. And so it is very, very difficult.
Is it harder? And my passion is kind of men who have been through all this stuff. Is it tougher for a man to win custody?
I want to say with the right attorney, no.
Okay.
But if you have an attorney that does not understand narcissism, and this can be, again, self-serving, but I don't want it to be. If you have an attorney that does not understand narcissism, then as a man, yes, it's going to be a lot harder for you, because already I think that the courts, it is 2025, but I do think that there still is that bias against men, and having, primary custody or, equal timeshare with your child, which is the 50-50, which courts don't like to say numbers, so we like to say timeshare. So, or parenting time, courts usually like to say parenting time now. They used to call it visitation, but then somebody came up with, you're not visiting your child, so okay, parenting time. But we all know what we're talking about here. So yes, it is difficult if you don't have an attorney that understands narcissism. Not that we go into court and ever mention the word narcissism, but we can show that what the other side is saying is just not true. Because
Right.
as you know, we have clients that are divorcing narcissists who are men, and we ask them to do that documentation. And they're like, well, I don't know how to journal. And I'm like, well, then that's fine. Then take, on a Word document or on your notes on your iPhone, just write down, like, when you picked up the child, if you had to take the child to the pediatrician, did you go? Why didn't you go? So all these things. And so if you don't have the right if you don't have the right attorney and you're divorcing a narcissist, whether you're male or female, God help you, because it's going to take that 5 to 7 years we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Or worse, maybe, if that's the case too. I can't imagine the people having to go through this. And again, the end result is whether or not you get to spend time with your kid.
Correct.
And it's a ridiculous process. It's a hard process. The narcissist makes it incredibly difficult on top of it, and you can still really lose time with your kid. And just because the courts say, okay, this is how much time you get with your kid, doesn't mean that the narcissist is even going to follow that on the other side of it, which is more difficult. So then again, you have to get into legal action and more money and more consequences, and it becomes kind of a nightmare. And that's why we really do say that the narcissist, with respect to parenting, is like the anti-parent.
Yes.
It's what was it you said? It's like fighting with the devil.
Yeah, it's like No, I said it was like parenting with the devil. Here you're trying to get away from, this abusive relationship and marriage that you've been in, correct? And now the courts...
And you're at your lowest.
And you're at your
usually
lowest.
at that point in time.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you've been married to a narcissist. If this is your highest, lowest is at the floor, because you've been gaslighted and you're emotionally in a bad place anyways. It's somebody that, generally speaking, the victim loved or loves, and yet at the same time can't live with this person. So it becomes an excruciating process. And you catch the victim at their lowest. They're starting this process at their emotional lowest. And then to have to fight for their children on top of it, and figure out finances and child custody and child support, and all of that together is nightmarish.
It is. And, we do have a lot of empathy for our clients that are going through this really difficult process of divorce, but divorcing a narcissist. That's why if you go on our website, there's so much information, like free information about it. I know you and I started our Instagrams to help the community understand what this is. We offer a lot of legal, free legal advice on our social media, even though, the
Hmm.
California State Bar doesn't like that. Even though we're not representing you, we'd like you to, give you suggestions of what you can do. And obviously, this podcast that we started, last year was free for the community to listen to. And even if you get one nugget and learn one thing that you can use in your custody battle, because it is a battle, John. It's not like no one is breezing through this with a narcissist. Even if the narcissist doesn't want to parent their child, they will fight you tooth and nail. So it's not, and I have a lot of clients that say that, like, if they wanted a parent, if my soon to be ex-spouse wanted a parent, I'd have no problem with it. But here I'm getting out of a toxic, abusive relationship, and now my child has to go with that parent. And
Hmm.
so it becomes very, very difficult. And, again, if they don't listen to the advice of counsel, it's going to be much more difficult for them. If they
Yeah.
listen to the advice of counsel, at least we can try to plug the holes, right? And explain to our client, this is why they're doing this. Like, they're making
Hmm.
another false and phony motion, and this is the reason why. And so it does take, I would say that in Southern California, where we practice law, it takes usually a normal divorce, a regular divorce should take a year. In a narcissistic divorce, it can take anywhere, I would say, from 3 to 7 years. So, to your point, you're paying attorney's fees, you're, splitting your assets, your debts. Sometimes you don't know what debts your spouse has. I have a lot of
Hmm.
times where,
Yeah, I was surprised. There's an extra 20, and I came out easy. There's an extra $20,000 on a credit card I didn't know about. So, and there are people who are far deeper
oh,
in
yes.
debt than me. I consider myself lucky. It was only 20 grand.
I have a client recently, she came in and she said, I've never signed a tax return. I've never signed one, and we are
Ooh.
$80,000 we owe the IRS, but I've never signed a tax return when we were jointly married. We were married, and I said, well, what do you mean? Didn't you file jointly? She said, yes. And I said, well, didn't you look at it when you signed it? She goes, I'm telling you, I never signed it. He forged my
Hmm.
signature on this document. And so now that we're getting divorced, I'm $80,000 in debt to the IRS. Forget the other
Mm.
debts that she had no idea about, but you don't want to mess with the
Yeah.
government's money, right? So I'm telling you, it is really, really tragic. And going through this with the client, obviously being an empathetic attorney that I am, it's really difficult, John. I mean, there's only so much, right, bandwidth that I have. So I have to be careful, the types of clients that I select for the law firm, and then obviously advocating for them. And a lot of times you'll tell me, like, you look tired, or have you lost weight? This is why, because it's very stressful when you are sort of championing for the underdog, and half the time they don't even know what's going on themselves. So you're educating them, and you're fighting a battle with the narcissistic attorney, because to your point, the narcissist will find a narcissistic attorney,
Mhm.
and so it's constant. And then sometimes your own client will turn against you and say, you should be doing more. You should be, making some of these motions. And you're going, no, that's just going to prolong the process. And if we
Mhm.
lose on a motion, you might have to pay their attorney's fees, the other side's attorney's fees.
Yeah.
So, it's really a battle, and it never ends. I will say that the good part about this is that only
There's a good part.
Yeah, only 95% of cases in California, they settle before going to trial. So
Oh,
at some point, you want to, the fifth strategy is file for a trial date. And that way you'll continue to work towards that trial date and try to settle. And as you know, once you make any proposal to the narcissist, they won't take it. So we always say, give us your settlement, let us look at it. Most times our client is like, we'll settle for anything to get rid of this person, right? And then
mm-hmm.
they'll come back and say, oh no, we want actually more or whatever, because they always change the settlement.
Right.
And
And they're all
so,
about money. So that, there's that.
yeah, money, control, all the things, And so that way you'll have a trial date, even if that trial date gets continued, let's say, by sometimes the court will continue it, or if you're not ready for trial, you can ask for a continuance, but at
Mm-hmm.
least you have that end date. And
Right.
so once you have that, then you work towards the settlement. But I will say, all this is all good and dandy, but then you have the post separation abuse, which we talk a lot about. I'm
And
laughing.
we'll have to save that for another time.
Yeah,
It's probably a podcast in and of itself, and talking about child support and who pays and who doesn't, and perhaps the inequity in that.
yes.
So there's an awful lot to discuss with respect to that.
Well, also that, the abuse that happens post divorce, that's a whole nother subject, because now you're sort of out of the court system, but you could still be battling. And you will, I mean, not could, I'm sorry, you will be battling with the narcissist post divorce. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they'll bring you back to court. Like I've had, clients call me years later, like, I'm back in court. I need you to represent me. I'm like, why? We settled everything. Well, the narcissist, you told me about them, we were back in court. And so if they don't win at the time of settlement or trial,
Mm-hmm.
then later on they'll ask maybe for more, more child custody or more money, or, or an omitted asset. And you're like, that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an asset while you were married. That person got that asset after separation, and now you're asking for it. So it is a battle. I'm not saying that you can't win the battle. I'm just saying you have to realize that winning means getting your freedom and your peace. Winning does not mean dollar for dollar, you're going to get exactly what they get. That's not what winning against a narcissist is.
Well, and the sadder part of it, and you kind of alluded to this, is you can you can fight for your kid. You can win shared custody of your child, and the kid may still hate you on the other end, because the narcissist has been talking in their ear all the time, because they'll smear campaign the kid, talk so badly about the good parent, and reframe what good parenting is, so that this kid that you've spent so much time trying to win time for, just hates you. And it really is a problematic process, even post divorce. It's difficult.
Yeah, that's where you get into real parental alienation. I know that word is very triggering for some people. But, where you get your child doesn't even want to spend time with you, to your point. And that's a discussion for another time, obviously. But
Yep.
yes, I do believe, though, my experience is that the child, at some point, usually when the child's late in their teens or 20s, or even sometimes when the child gets married themselves and has a kid, they realize, wow, like, I was on the wrong side here. I was
Hmm.
siding with the narcissist.
Yeah.
But it only happens when the narcissistic parent turns on the child, and it's a repeated thing where the child is seeing it for themselves, because you're out of the picture, right? You're divorced from that person.
Yep.
But that is a whole discussion for another time. But, thank you for letting me share today, because
Sure.
I do feel like I know we kind of came up with this topic yesterday because I was in court for 7 hours, and I was like, we really need to talk about how to win child custody from a narcissist, but it's not the way that, we think of winning. It's just to win your freedom and sort of guide your child through the process as best as you can while you're still co-parenting with the devil. So
Yep. Now keep in mind, if you're out there and you're listening to Padideh and you go, yeah, I want to talk to her. Remember that attorneys only can work in their state for the most part. So Padideh is pretty well confined to California, so she's not able to go help you in Texas or Maryland or Georgia, or wherever you might be necessarily. But you do want to go find somebody who understands the mindset of a narcissist and can help you through that. And if you happen to be in California, in fact, Padideh's website would still be a great resource for you. It's jafarilegal.com. If you want to look her up there, and there's information on there. You can check her out on TikTok and also on Instagram as well. Jafari Legal in both of those platforms too. And we're going to continue to have conversations here at the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel about these kinds of things to help you win and improve your life and hopefully win your kids through some of this stuff as well. And made sense today, Padideh, to go have a conversation with you because this is your expertise. So I'm really glad we did that today. And it was good conversation. So thank you very much for your insight and your wisdom.
Thank you.
The Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel, I'm John McKenney. If you're looking for us online, you can find us at narc.podcast. And Padideh, again, is at Jafari Legal on Instagram and TikTok. You can find me on Instagram at Male Victims of Female Narcissists or malevictimsoffemalenarcissist.com. And our podcast also has a website. It's a narcissistabuserecoverychannel.com. We'd love to have you come visit and check out some of our other episodes. We're on Spotify and also on Apple Music right now. You soon to come. And we're looking forward to seeing you and helping you. If you need coaching, you can reach out to me. I also do coaching, particularly for men, but also coach some women through the process too. Again, John McKenney and Padideh Jafari. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, be sure to follow us on Instagram with the handle narc.podcast. The guest views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are their own. The information presented is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. The co-hosts are not licensed therapists. Seek professional help, as information is often state-specific.